and on Odyssey.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Representative Mike McCall, who's the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was on with Mike Emanuel on Fox over the weekend to offer his informed assessment of the state of play with respect to a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And, Putin has taken a look at this, along with President Xi in China. He's always wanted Ukraine. It's a breadbasket of Russia. And his calculation is that this is a weak president. And now is the time. And I would also say, Mike, that his waiver of congressional sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which will allow Putin to complete his pipeline into Europe, was a major foreign policy blunder that just emboldened and empowered Putin, which now gives him leverage over Europe and NATO right now.
And McCall sort of said, almost in passing, but it's more important than a passing comment, that likely, Putin will take the port of Odessa, and then the question is, then does he go to Poland? Does he go to the Baltics?
Where we were going to send LNG, clean energy, and now he's probably going to maybe take that over. I think there's going to be more and more aggression to restore the old glory of the Soviet Empire. That is his ultimate goal here.
For more on this and other geopolitical topics, please be joined for our weekly confab with Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of the book Brutal War, Jungle Fighting, Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, best Merry Christmas to you guys.
You as well.
Thank you very much. Keep an eye on McCall. He is a really interesting guy, congressman from Texas, developing some very serious foreign policy chops. Definitely, I think, a conservative leader to keep an eye on in the future. Putin is the only guy that really knows what Putin is going to do. He has all the options on the table. And so anybody who says this is what Putin is going to do, it misses the big thing, which is actually Putin will decide what's best for him. And I can actually argue both sides of this. On the one hand, you would be fighting 44 million people who are going to fight back in Ukraine and fight back very, very hard. If you conquered the country, you would have to pay to maintain it. They pay $20 billion just to keep little tiny Transnistria and Moldova. So it would be an enormous burden on the administration. Of course, they would be a global pariah. So there's a downside to that. But I'm not saying Putin is not going to do that. I had a delegation in from a country that's very close to Russia, probably the people that follow the Russians more closely than anybody and who really understand them extremely well. And their assessment is Putin must at some point reconquer the Ukraine. He might well think that today is the day to roll the dice and take all the marbles. So you have both sides of it there.
Well, if Putin does invade Ukraine, what is the USA's role and our allies' role going to be in it?
Well, I think we will be supporting. I think, support the Ukrainians. And like I said, there's 44 million Ukrainians. They've got 1 million people under arms. They're going to fight really, really hard. And when the pictures show up of the bombing and the dead bodies and everything else, the world is going to get really, really upset with Putin. This might not be the easiest invasion ever. It is the middle of winter. As it gets colder, it actually gets better for military operations because the ground is more solid. On the other hand, and you can't dig foxholes and stuff like that. On the other hand, Ukrainians know they're coming. They can dig their foxholes now. The Russian army is very powerful, except they really don't have very good logistical systems. So sustaining a military in a prolonged campaign over time would be a real challenge for them, particularly in winter. So, it's not a free lunch for them.
Holman Jenkins writes in the Wall Street Journal that the threats of sanctions, lethal aid to the Ukrainians, weapons to the Ukrainians, he writes that the U.S. has actually been, I'm quoting him, The U.S. has actually been quite shy of actions that might destabilize Mr. Putin's regime, and he goes through a litany of things that, if publicly disclosed, particularly on intel matters, would make it very difficult for Western leaders to continue to countenance Putin. Is that a fair assessment? Why would we be shy about taking a hard line with Putin about destabilizing his regime?
Well, I think because we think it would make Putin more threatening. Look, the unimpeachable evidence from decades of dealing with this guy, and I don't know why people do this because we know this, is the exact opposite is true. Putin respects and fears strength, and he sees weakness and accommodation and appeasement as a green light to just go get more. And I'll give you a perfect example of this, told to me by somebody who got it from a Russian government official, which is the Russians had some mercenaries in Syria. For whatever reason, these mercenaries decided to attack an American base. President Trump basically said, take them out. They just literally flattened the earth with these guys. Right. That message got back to Putin, and Putin was like, oh, okay, let's make sure we don't do that anymore.
Well, so then is this – so what you would argue was not the posture of the Trump administration that we don't want to destabilize him because we could get somebody worse, but it seems to be the posture of the Biden administration?
Well, I think there's two things. I don't think that the Trump administration made any effort to destabilize the Russian regime, and honestly, I don't really think that's necessary. What Trump did is he made a very serious effort to deter Putin in his foreign policy. So he was actually incredibly strong on the Ukraine, incredibly tough on sanctions, kicked out a bunch of Russian spies, tried to block Nord Stream 2, gave offensive weapons to the Ukrainians, and so he matched Putin measure for measure. If Putin did something aggressive, Trump did something 3 times more aggressive back to him. I think that's what's really key. What's really key for us is we don't really care about Russia. What we care is that Russia doesn't destabilize Europe. Putin doesn't, and this is another factor, Putin doesn't have a free lunch at home either. It is true that he has pretty much crushed his domestic political opposition. His economy is okay. He's tremendously benefited from Biden's energy policies. So Russian energy is bringing in good money, that enough to keep the regime going. That's not really a problem. He does have a serious COVID problem. They've massively underreported their COVID. Their vaccine is not as dependable as the Western vaccine. And shockingly, they have very, very low usage rates in Russia. People are very, very hesitant to take the vaccine in Russia, which is very ironic because the Russians have actually been bombarding Moldova and Ukraine and Georgia and Romania with fake information about, the Western vaccines you'll die and everything else. And actually it's the Russians who are the most risk averse to taking vaccines. So that's a real challenge. People are dying in St. Petersburg at really unprecedented rates. So he's got, and actually if you can, from the kind of covert polling, right? I don't know how they do this, but people that get into Russia and actually, manage to ask Russians what they really think, overwhelmingly Russians have no interest in invading Ukraine at all.
I wanted to talk about the border. The mayor of Yuma, Arizona, has declared a local emergency there because of his city being overrun by people coming to this country illegally. We know we're looking at 2 million migrants who will have been arrested illegally attempting to cross the border this year, which is a 30-year high. But another number that's even perhaps more disquieting, deportations. We know 85% of asylum applications are going to be denied, and yet that doesn't mean people get deported. We've seen deportations, according to ICE, reduced by a factor of 5 this year as compared to 2019 under Trump. And in some offices like Atlanta, Houston, the deportations are down by a factor of 10, a factor of 13. This is a major issue that's just going to breed more lawlessness, not to mention more lawlessness at the border, not to mention what it means for people in this country illegally who shouldn't be here. And we know that some element of those people will commit crimes here, as we've seen in the past. The data, it's just the data.
So often forgotten is that enforcing immigration laws is part of border security. People are less likely to want to spend $10, $20, whatever, $1,000 to get smuggled into the country if they know that they're going to get kicked out of the country and sent right back to their home country. And once you get inside the country, the process of going through a deportation is way more difficult, way more expensive. So not deporting people is a big problem. We used to say, and I don't know because COVID's probably screwed this up, but half of the people that are illegally in the U.S. are visa overstays. So if you could imagine if we had a normal global transportation system and people were coming here in kind of the numbers in a normal year, the number of illegal immigrants in the United States would absolutely just blow up. So, and this administration is making no effort in any way, shape, or form to try to get borders and immigration enforcement under control. That's a fact.
Well,
it's also a fact that even though it gets blown off the front pages by other, even more egregious acts by the administration, increasingly Americans all over the country are really unhappy and upset and angry at this policy. And I think the third thing is if you are running for president in 2024 and you get elected in 2025, you will get elected with a demand from the American people that one of the first things you do is immediately secure the border, and you immediately start deporting people in large numbers to get this back under control. And if you are running for president and you don't have a plan to do that, you are in big trouble when you start. And the only thing that's going to change that I worry about in the meantime is I really worry about the next 9/11 coming from border crossers, and I just look at the clock and I watch it tick down 3 years, and I just worry it's going to happen.
Did you hear what Governor DeSantis proposed? I mean, he kind of said it tongue-in-cheek, but he's budgeting $8 million to send illegal immigrants, back to where they came because they're shipping them there via planes in the middle of the night. But he said that what if he sent them to Delaware, to Martha's Vineyard, then the border would be secure the next day. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't think it would, because I think the far left is so hammerlocked in the president on this that I just don't see how he voluntarily changes these policies. I will say, if you look at the raft of measures that DeSantis proposed that he's going to impose in the state to make it more difficult for illegal aliens to be in the state, and then you look at the list of heritage recommendations, they look shockingly similar.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of remarkable, this snapback in the first year of Biden with control of Congress. It's basically going back to restating the rationale for Trump's candidacy in 2016, both with respect to lawlessness at the border and how that seeps into the rest of the country, combined with now something that's even exacerbated, even provides more rationale than it provided for Trump in 2016, which is the domestic crime in major cities because of the defund and decarceration Democrats.
And the other thing is when Trump ran in 2016, and what he was proposing, it was all theoretical because nobody had ever done that. But the difference now is in 4 years under President Trump, the border was largely secured. Immigration enforcement was working in the manner in which it was supposed to. And we were even looking at kind of reforming the legal immigration system. Mm-hmm. So there is a playbook to follow. It's like if you won the Super Bowl last year and you can bring the same team back, there's a good chance you can win the Super Bowl, next year. So I think I think the challenge for a person that would challenge Biden, and I, me, I do policy, not politics. So what do I know? But and if there is a different president, they should be able to walk in the front door with a team that's experienced and knows how to do this, that can do it in a way that is effective. And I will tell you two things. One is, people will say that's inhumanity. We have more inhumanity, more sadness, more tragedy, more destruction on the border than we have ever had. And if you think of the 100 people who died in the horrible car crash in Mexico, all this blood is on Biden's hand. He has created all this human misery. And the most humane thing you can do at the border is stopping illegal trafficking in the cartels, So it's not inhumane. And the other thing is people say, oh, my God, it'll cost a ton of money. But when you add up the cost of opioid deaths and criminal deaths and damage to the economy and environmental damage and everything else, let me tell you, securing the border is a bargain. And then you throw something like stopping another 9/11, which, by the way, was on the order of like $500 billion. Border security is pretty dang cheap.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP at the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. His book, Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Lieutenant Colonel Jim, thanks as always.
Yeah, I hear it makes a great Christmas gift.
It does. Brutal War. Brutal War. It's
Gather around the tree, little kiddies.
it's right up there with a Christmas Carol for the season.